members have committees, but we do not have a quorum, so we are unable to take action. I think this is the start of the Legislative Audit Commission. The first item of business, I don't believe we need a quorum for. You should have in your packet, or I handed to you, the list of appointments for the 3 subcommittees for the 2019-2020 year. And what I did is I looked at last year's and tried to make a similar appointments in terms of the balance and with the majorities and where the House versus Senate. So I don't know, Ms. Randall, we kind of worked on this. If you want to walk through for the record what they are.
Mr. Chair, members, for the record, my name is Judy Randall. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for OLA's Program Evaluation Division. Sure, I can, for the record, read off the handout that everybody has. First is the Executive Subcommittee, and Mr. Chair, you will serve ex officio on that committee. And then we have Representative Liebling, Representative Pearson, Senator Cran, and Senator Klein on that subcommittee.
And Senator Cran would be the chair.
And Senator Cran will be the chair. Thank you for that addition. On the Evaluation Subcommittee, we have Representative Bernardi as the chair. Then we also have Representative Hansen and Representative Quam, and then Senator Frentz and Senator Cran. And then finally, on the Audit Subcommittee, we have Senator Kiffmeyer as chair, Senators Benson and Rest, and Representative Erickson. And so, Mr. Chair, that is the subcommittees as we talked them through. They mostly follow what we've done in the past, with a little bit of exceptions accounting for people's availability and interest.
And interest.
Thank you.
Some told me they didn't want certain things.
And Mr. Chair.
Representative Erickson.
Whoops. Well, Mr. Chair, I think that we're a little weak on females in the evaluation.
Well, Representative Erickson, the chair, is Representative Bernardi.
But that's only one.
Representative Erickson.
And Mr. Chair, very heavy on the audit, all females.
And Representative Erickson, if you and I and Representative Quam wanted to have a discussion on that, I would be happy to follow up with you afterwards. Is that okay, Representative? I think we're still searching for a quorum, but I'll, Mr. Nobles, if you want to, or we'll talk about the bills.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for the record, Jim Nobles, Legislative Auditor. And members of the Legislative Audit Commission, periodically we have proposed legislation to amend our law. And I must say that the law that you have enacted for the Office of Legislative Auditor, our authority and responsibilities, as well as the authority and responsibilities of the Legislative Audit Commission, is absolutely important. Some people actually kid me that I carry around this notebook, which under one tab includes our statutes. And that's because it's very important. Everything that we do, how we do it, what we don't do is defined in the law. And so it is our mandate, it is our charter, and so it's very important that it is up to date and accurately reflects what we do, how we do it, and what you want us to do in the rest of the legislature. So this year we have 2 bills to propose. The first one I would suggest is more of a housekeeping bill. And I think you have those, I hope, in front of you, or at least a version of them, if not the jacketed copies. So let's talk first about bill draft from the Revisor's Office, number 19-3736. And that is the one I consider more the housekeeping bill. So if you have that one in front of you, let me just go through it. Section 1 and Section 4 are really companions, because Section 4 repeals a provision which requires the Legislative Audit Commission to select an economic development topic every year. This was enacted several years ago. It was sponsored by Senator Rest. We've gone through several evaluations of economic development topics. And in discussing this with members, and particularly with Senator Rest, I think we've come to the end of what we need as a mandate and a requirement. So that provision is repealed in Section 4, but we replace it in Section 1 with language that says that the Legislative Audit Commission will consider each year an economic development topic during its topic selection process. So we basically get rid of a mandate, a requirement, and we make it something that the Legislative Audit Commission will consider. Section 2 is a little more subtle to explain, but it has to do with something that is very important, and that is the requirement that state agencies notify the Office of the Legislative Auditor when they have had not public data accessed or provided in some way that is not authorized by law. Now, we changed this language, again, subtly, because we had an episode a few weeks ago where the Department of Public Safety provided some not public information to organizations that have the legal authority to obtain what is called bulk data, driver's license, vehicle registration data. But what the department did not do is screen out that data that people had said, I don't want my personal information provided to these bulk data purchasers. But that data was provided by the department. Now, the department argued that this really wasn't something that they had to report to us because, first of all, under the existing law, the bulk data purchasers didn't come in and get that data. They didn't obtain it on their own authority. They were provided that data. So that was point one that the agency said, doesn't make that really something that we had to report. Point two was that they didn't have any indication that these organizations that get this data would use it for any unlawful purpose. Well, we felt that that was kind of straining an interpretation of the law. And ultimately, they did give us a notice. They did make a notice to the people whose data was provided, we think, without proper authorization. So we're just tweaking this language so everybody understands that these kinds of disclosures of data, not public data, need to be notified to the legislative auditor. Now, we need that notification because we really want to know what's going on in state government. We have IT security auditors, and we track what's going on in terms of, if you want to call them that, data breaches. And we want to be able to follow up, if necessary, and make a determination as to what happened and what role we might need to play. So, Mr. Chairman, that is Section 2.
I'll note that we do have a quorum now.
And then in Section 3, we again insert language that we will give high priority to audits of human service programs. But underneath that, we delete language that really kind of prescribes how we are supposed to conduct those audits. So it really gets us back to saying a message from the legislature, make audits of human service programs a high priority, which we will, because there's a lot of money there. We will always make those a high priority. We have to. But we thought that the language underneath that was a little bit too prescriptive, and that if we had some discretion, we could do a risk analysis and do better work in that area. So again, Section 4, as I've already mentioned, is really a companion with Section 1, and it simply repeals the economic development requirement. If there are any questions on Bill 1, if not, we can go to Bill 2, but I think Senator Kiffmeyer may have a question.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. What is this? How do you make, is my mic on for one thing?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Nobles. I have concerns, though, about Section 3. And I listened to your your explanation here, but I can hear the members from my area being concerned about deleting all of this language. And what does that mean then for the future? So I look at this and I just have concerns about carrying this forward and gaining the kind of support that we would need for this.
Mr. Nobles.
Mr. Chairman, I can understand that. I understand that people who have a high concern about human service programs would like to provide in statute some direction, and I will certainly work with any members that have some concern, either that they want to retain this language or put in other language. I think the important thing here is that we do a lot of work at the Department of Human Services. First, we are required to reach an opinion on the state's financial statements. There's a great deal of money at the Department of Human Services. We also go there because we're required to under the Single Audit Act of the United States, and we are the auditor of federal funds that are received by the state of Minnesota. And so because so many of those funds are at the Department of Human Services, we are there. We literally have staff that have office space there. We are there constantly. And we are assessing risk to determine what kinds of audits, what focus we need to have. And so I would like to work out language, Senator Kiffmeyer, that you and your colleagues would be comfortable with.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that, Mr. Nobles, because I think I hear and appreciate what you are saying. This might be just a little bit too far for us, and recognizing that, but could there be something in regards to that? That's a possibility, and I'd certainly like to search to accommodate that.
Mr. Chair, absolutely, and because this really touches on an area that Mr. Boozy is involved in, he may want to say something to that issue.
Mr. Boozy.
Mr. Chair, committee members, and just to provide one tangible example, first of all, when you look at the healthcare programs and medical assistance, one thing that's important to remember is that when you look at all 400 federal programs that the state participates in, these healthcare programs are about 10 times as costly as the next largest federal program, and that doesn't even include the state match that's added on there. So we want to spend a lot of time in this area, and whether this was in law or not, this is an area that we'd have full-time teams working on. The problems that we have, though, with the very prescriptive language is that it prohibits us from going out and taking the limited staffing resources that we have to branch into areas that we think really may address some more pressing problems. And one example is we produced 3 reports now last year on healthcare eligibility, and we pointed out a lot of problems with recipient attestation of their wages and other financial details. But one of the things that's in those reports is we found that there's lots of issues that seem to center around the technology systems that drive those programs. One in particular is called METS. And today, when we have prescriptive language that says we're going to look at eligibility and we're going to look at eligibility and look at it again over and over, it takes our ability to go out and look at these other areas and branch into them. It inhibits our ability to make those moves, and we think we need to pivot. So this year in particular, we think it's really important to go over and take a deep dive and look at what are these problems with METS that we're seeing over and over again, and look at that technology system and say, is there some overarching problem within these systems that's yielding consistent problems in these areas?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that additional explanation. That does fit, I certainly understand that. But I think if we can just leave it as it is written, I couldn't support it. But I think with that situation of being able to see us go forward and work together on that language to fit today, to kind of accomplish that, I'm certainly open to doing that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that I and Mr. Boozy as well, but we get together with Senator Kiffmeyer, others, I assume Senator Benson, but also anyone else who's interested. I'm sure that Representative Liebling is probably, this is a high area of interest to her. Would be happy to get together and work out language that members are comfortable with.
And
Thank you.
members and the intent here, or what I was going to ask the commission to do, because we're going to be bumping up on deadlines, is if we could take a vote in support and maybe recognizing that if it leaves here, members can sign it if it's approved. If it is not approved, we don't need to put in the bill. But if we support it, moving it, it would go through the committee process and provide ample time for any amendments through the committee process. But we have a very quick timeline here before bills. In the House, this would have to be considered by government operations and probably state government finance potentially, and that would have to happen within a week. Representative Liebling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Nobles, I appreciate the explanation too. And I think that this is a good idea because there are so many things about our Health and Human Services system that really do need to be examined. And Mr. Boozy mentioned METS, but you know, there are just so many aspects of the way we do things, and it is so much money, and eligibility and making proper eligibility determinations is certainly extremely important, but it's only one of many very important things. And it may not even be where, you know, if money is being lost and wasted and so on, that may not even be the biggest place that that's happening. So I actually, when I read this at home and thought it through a little bit, I thought, this makes sense to me, to have more flexibility. And also, if it's so locked down that this is the thing you're going to be looking at time after time after time, it's kind of like letting somebody know you're coming to do an inspection. You know, it would be better to have a wider range of, you know, things that you might be looking at and a little more flexibility so that you do have the element of more of a, maybe this is the wrong term, but more of a spot check philosophy than looking at the same thing time after time after time, which is certainly not to say that you should stop looking at that. I think none of us are saying that you should stop looking at it, but I do think that, you know, I'm comfortable with the language that you have drafted here. Not that, you know, I could also be open to hearing some tweak to that language, but I do think that this is appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I might just suggest that this proves the value of a bicameral system, that we have a different opinion from the House and the Senate, and I would be happy to work with Senator Kiffmeyer on an author's amendment, frankly, that could be the first action to put this in the form that the Senate wants. We can leave it in the form that the House wants, and then we will get to conference committee.
Or, Mr. Chair,
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Representative Liebling and I will come to some agreement, and then we don't even have to do that, right?
Skipping the middle people.
I would just like to get it approved and get it in the hopper today, so you could start your process if that's possible.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to be sure, though, when you vote on it and somebody says, well, the Legislative Audit Commission recommended this, it's got to go with, you know, some understanding either from us or in the motion. That's all. I don't want to really spend more time today. I think it's enough said, and then
Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that we, the Legislative Audit Commission, support these bills and put them in the respected bodies in the hoppers or whatever you call them. And maybe you can help me with how I should actually make this motion.
I think Mr. Nobles has a suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you have a motion on both, I think we need to explain the second bill. And for that, I want to turn again to Mr. Boozy.
Mr. Boozy.
Mr. Chair, committee members, the second bill is actually, it's a complicated bill, so I want to set the stage for it. As most of us are aware today from the committees that you operate in, agencies rely on IT to deliver critical government services. However, IT is extremely complicated. It's also extremely costly. And IT continues to be a high visibility pain point for both the executive branch and the legislature. The goal of this proposal that you have before you harnesses the technical capabilities of OLA to improve legislative governance and oversight of IT. More specifically, the proposal funds a small but extremely capable information technology audit team. The goal of this team is going to be to provide the Audit Commission and other committees throughout the legislature with accurate, objective, and timely and useful reports on a variety of technical topics. Today, we're doing some work on MNLARs in OLA, but at any given point in time, there's 300 to 400 system development projects that are underway within Minute. We're also looking at doing ongoing technical reviews of the business systems that state agencies use to deliver services to our citizens. At any point in time, Minute estimates that there's about 3,000 business applications in its portfolio. We would like to be looking at assessments of the state networks and the IT infrastructure. Examples in that category is right now, the state is moving a lot of its computing load from state-run data centers over to Amazon Web Services. Having an independent body look at some of those kind of moves would be an example. And then finally, ongoing updates on cybersecurity controls as well, providing the legislature with more information. The funding for the proposal comes from an annual assessment on the Minute Services Revolving Fund. As most of you know, Minute has about 2,300 employees, has annual expenditures of over $600 million per year. This proposal builds a team of about 6 to 7 IT audit professionals to provide the legislature with information and oversight. The total proposed funding that we have in the bill today would be about $1.1 million, and that's implemented through a 1/3 of 1% assessment on the payroll costs that are in the IT Services Revolving Fund. So in effect, what this means is that legislative oversight is a small piece of the state's overall IT budget going forward. As most of you know, accurate, objective, and timely and useful reports from the OLA is only a piece of the puzzle. You've seen in some of the recent reports that OLA has delivered that there also has to be a better job providing governance of IT. There's been recommendations now in some of our reports about getting better legislative committee structures in place. And the executive branch clearly needs to do a better job as well, delivering services, leveraging its economy of scale. But this is one important piece that solves the problem that today policymakers are struggling with the fact that they're not getting information, and we want to use our technical capabilities to give you information in a variety of different areas, especially those areas that happen to be hot button topics at any given point in time. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd be willing to answer any questions.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boozy, do we typically use the word money in a statute? I'm thinking that maybe that's not a statutory word, but I mean, that's a small change, but that's just a little item. Thank you.
Mr. Boozy.
Mr. Chair, committee members, whatever word we want to use to reflect the fact that there has to be a funding model, we'd be happy to go with that word.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boozy or Mr. Nobles, do we do this in any other area, have this kind of automatic appropriation based on the value of another fund to fund the OLA? I just don't remember seeing this in any other context.
Mr. Nobles.
Mr. Chair, Representative Liebling, we do not. There was a proposal back some years ago when there was a controversy over the bulk data transfers. This predates the most recent controversy. But back some years ago, there were a lot of legislative concerns. And as a part of that, the legislature mandated that the Office of Legislative Auditor audit periodically those transfers of driver's license and vehicle registration data to certain organizations that are authorized to purchase that data. You mandated that we do that audit, and you've provided a funding mechanism similar to this. You authorized a certain percent of the fee that was paid to the state to be appropriated to the Office of Legislative Auditor. I must acknowledge the governor vetoed that. There is opposition, and there likely is opposition to this approach too, for us taking money out of an executive branch appropriation. But this was the mechanism we thought could work. It limits the amount of money that would be available. The obvious alternative is, well, there are two alternatives. That is, don't give us any more money. That's one, always. But the other is you appropriate the money directly from the same funds that you will use to appropriate to the various state agencies for their IT projects. Now, I must say, part of the problem is that that money, as you well know, is scattered around in many different budgets. It's in your budget, it's in the Department of Transportation budget, it's scattered all around state government. So to accumulate this same amount of money to be appropriated to the Office of the Legislative Auditor, it has to be in the target that is given to the State Government Finance Committee. And we have always struggled to obtain any funding in that budget because it is always a very tight target, and there are many more compelling recipients in front of us, like the veterans organizations, military affairs, and others. So we have sought and not obtained funding through that approach. So this is a different approach.
Representative Liebling?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nobles. I mean, I can well understand why you would be advocating for this approach. I do have some concerns about it, though. I mean, oftentimes we have, legislators want the OLA to do all kinds of stuff, and we're constantly, legislators are very well aware of the work of the OLA, and often when we're passing bills or looking at certain things, we put in statute, perhaps inappropriately sometimes, that we also want an audit done. And it seems to me that at the point that we're doing that we're asking sort of separately, I don't know if there's a term for it, but, separately in statute, not through our usual process of asking for evaluations to be done, but separately, kind of one-off in statute. That is the point at which your office should give a fiscal note, if you will, and say, well, sure, if you want us to do it, here's what the cost is, so that those things kind of go together. What concerns me about this is that I think it'll be less transparent to legislators that this funding is going out. And also I was not here in the room, but I tried to listen to the presentation of the audit of Minute. And what I sort of understood from that is that one of the concerns from Minute itself is that they have sort of the same problem that you've just described, that their budget's kind of coming in bits and pieces all over the place. So they have that problem too, and I hope that we can straighten that out so that they have a more understandable and predictable pot of money to use for their projects. And then maybe if we can do that, maybe at that point, it would make more sense to fund the OLA to do along with that. But I must say I find it a little bit, I don't know, maybe I have to get used to the idea, but it's not something that I find myself saying, gee, this is a great idea. I feel a little hesitant about this approach.
And
Mr. Nobles.
Mr. Chair, Senator Liebling, I really respect that because I understand that one of the mechanisms that you as the legislature exercises for accountability is the budget process. And every other year, you expect agencies to come forth, present their budgets, and get the money you appropriated in that legislative session for that biennium. This would be an ongoing standing appropriation from a source of money. And I realize that not only for OLA, but for state government generally, that has always been problematic. But again, the alternative has also been problematic, and that is going in a more straightforward way to the State Government Finance Committee and asking them with their very tight target to find a significant amount of money to fund OLA's IT security audit work. So if the commission is uncomfortable with this, I mean, we can certainly, and we do need to come back to you in a meeting or two and give you what our proposal is for our next biennial budget. And we can include this amount of money in that and see if that is more, it will certainly be more transparent. And it will be more on an ad hoc biennium by biennium basis. But if that is the approach that you're more comfortable with, we can certainly present that.
Senator Klein and then Senator Kiffmeyer.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Nobles, I'm not sure if this is on, is it? In any case, do you have examples from previous fiscal years of what this formula, 1/3 of 1% of the payroll costs, what would it mean in dollar amounts?
Mr. Boozy.
Mr. Chair, committee members, in fiscal year 18, the last year that Minute had published statements put together, their payroll and personnel costs were about $350 million per year for their 2,300 employees. We estimated that if we did the 1/3 of 1% tax or assessment on that, it would end up being a little bit over 1 million, about 1.1 million.
Senator Klein. Senator Kiffmeyer.
I'll pass.
I think one way we might be able to deal with this is the second bill is a finance bill that would not have the same urgency. We could perhaps, Representative Bernardi, move the first bill to be recommended for introduction. That is not an approval. And that is a policy bill that would need to start moving quickly if that's, Representative Bernardi.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to have the Legislative Audit Commission recommend introducing the first bill we discussed today to begin the committee process for approval.
Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion is adopted. And then, Mr. Boozy and Mr. Nobles, you'll work on the second bill, maybe, and come back with a recommendation?
We will, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Boozy.
Mr. Chair, one final comment on the second bill. One of the issues you have when you're dealing with technology in an area like IT audit is it's very difficult to decide to do a project and use a pay-by-the-drink type of an approach because it's hard to find the staff to do the work and to staff up a function. So that's one of the reasons why we were looking at putting together a team that had very deep technical skills in a variety of different areas, so that when we were called upon by the legislature or any other body to look at an area, that we would have the capability to step in and do that work without having to go through a hiring process starting from scratch. So just a little context of why the team approach made most sense to us.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boozy, I appreciate that, and actually, the argument you're making sounds an awful lot like the one we sometimes make for putting more money in the highway user fund, because we need, certain projects obviously need long-term planning. But what I would say to that, though, is that perhaps a better approach then would be to come to us with a proposal for putting together a team and funding the team, rather than doing it through the door of give us a certain amount of money at certain, that grows along with that other budget. And kind of make the case for what kind of people you need and what kind of salaries you need, just like a regular appropriation. I mean, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I think the work you do is incredibly important. I just don't really feel drawn to this method of funding it. And I think that it would be, again, more transparent and easier perhaps for us to evaluate if you had a proposal for putting that team together and funding it, rather than asking for funding and then saying we needed to put together a team.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next topic is the debt service equalization for school facilities evaluation. Ms. Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and thank you for hearing our evaluation of the debt service equalization program for school facilities. We're just trying to bring up the slides. There we go. The debt service equalization program is incredibly complex, and Ms. Hauer will walk you through some of the complexities and technicalities of the formula. I think the main thing for you all to know is that the amount of funding that's available to school districts through this program has decreased over time, and the number of school districts that have been assisted through this program have decreased over time. And the school districts that are getting assistance have received less and less money over time. So ultimately, again, the overall value of this program has declined significantly over time. We think the main question for you all to think about as you hear this report and ponder our findings and recommendations is how much do you want to help school districts with their school facilities? The idea here is part of the idea behind the program is to help equalize the burden on different school districts with different levels of tax base. And so if you want to help school districts with their school facilities back at the original levels, we may need to think more creatively about how we're doing this program. And so in the report, we make different recommendations about different ways maybe that you can tweak the formula or factor in different considerations when you're considering which school districts to help with this type of funding need. But to get into the details, I know it was really kind of oblique and vague, but to get into the details, Ms. Hauer, who is the evaluation manager of the project, will walk you through it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Hauer.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chair and members, for the record, my name is Jody Hauer. I'm with the Office of the Legislative Auditor. I'm glad to have the opportunity today to describe to you briefly the contents of our evaluation on debt service equalization, and I'll get right to it. But before I do, I would like to introduce my colleague and team member, Will Harrison, who's sitting to my right. He worked with me on this evaluation. I'm going to start by talking about the three main findings that we concluded as a result of the evaluation work. So first, the debt service equalization program has had limited impact. Now, as Ms. Randall was suggesting in her introductory remarks, this means a couple of things. First of all, it means that there's, relative to the earlier years of the program, there's a small amount of funding through the debt service equalization program, and the aid is available to a smaller number of districts. Our second finding is that Minnesota has several programs that are designed to help school districts with their facilities, but the debt service equalization is unique in how it helps districts, and we don't believe that other programs would work as a substitute for it. And then third, the Minnesota Department of Education is required to review most of the school district proposals for facilities, and that has to happen before the districts issue the bonds. In a sample of cases that we looked at from the past 3 years, we found that the department completed its review and comment process for most, but not all, of the facility proposals in a timely way. Now, Ms. Randall had talked about the fact that it's a complex program, and it is. I wanted to take just a moment to define some of the background terms that you probably will want to know, or at least understand the context in this with this particular program. So first, okay, what are bonds? Most people know bonds are a financial tool, and in the context of this program, the bonds are issued by the school districts as a way to borrow money to pay for their capital projects. So debt service is the principal and interest that is owed and has to be paid back over time. Now, eligible debt service is the capital debt that is defined in law by specific requirements, and I'm going to get to that in a future slide, so I'm going to leave that somewhat vague at this point. Equalization, of course, is the aid that the state provides. It's a means to offset some of the disparities in the property wealth as you look from one district to the next around the state. The equalizing factor, it's a percentage set in law. It's a part of the formula used to determine how much aid is going to be available. A larger equalizing factor will always equal a larger amount of aid. Referenda, everybody I think is pretty familiar with this, but in the context of this particular program, school districts have to obtain voter approval through a referendum for their new buildings or their other major renovations to their facilities. The tax base is the taxable value of all the property within the school district. For those of you that are familiar with the property tax terminology, it's the adjusted net tax capacity of that school district. And then the final term is the thresholds. Again, it's a part of the formula for the debt service equalization program. Their percentages, they're in law.
They're actually cutoff points that help delineate the unequalized revenue, that is the revenue that a district has to pay entirely from its own local property taxes, from each of two other tiers of revenue that are in the program. So what's the purpose of the program? The purpose of the debt service equalization program is to provide financial assistance that will help lower taxpayers' taxes in certain school districts that are constructing or renovating either new facilities or existing facilities. Now, to be eligible, the school districts have to meet two important criteria. The first is they have to have a low amount of tax-based wealth per student. So we're talking about the property poor school districts here. And the second criterion is that they have to have relatively high amounts of debt. So they have to have a lot of capital debt. Having said that, not all types of debt service is eligible for this debt service equalization program. So to be eligible, a few things have to be in place. First of all, the bonds have to be for facilities that have the primary purpose of serving students in grades kindergarten through grade 12. Now this means, for instance, that bonds could not be used to build facilities for a pre-kindergarten program. The bonds have to be for capital projects that undergo what is known as a review and comment by the Department of Education, and the project has to receive from that review and comment a positive rating if it's going to qualify for the aid. And the bonds have to follow a bond schedule set in law that's the bond schedule that's approved by the Minnesota Department of Education, and this is typically going to be a 20-year repayment schedule. So when we talk about eligible debt service, and I'm going to be talking about eligible debt service kind of throughout this presentation, we're talking about debt service that meets these three criteria and a couple of others that are laid out specifically in the debt service equalization law. And at the same time, there are certain types of debt that do not qualify, again, specified in law. I'll just give one example, and that has to do with certain debt that's incurred by school districts when they're purchasing certain equipment, like vehicles or computer hardware or office equipment, things that are purchased with certain financing tools like a certificate of debt or capital note. Now, with this kind of definition of eligible debt service in mind, I want you to know that many school districts have debt service that is eligible for the program as defined in law, but not every such district actually receives aid through the program. And as you can see from this diagram on the slide, for fiscal year 2019, only 15% of the 231 school districts that had eligible debt service actually received aid through this program. So generally speaking, which districts get aid from this program? Well, it's the amount of the district's eligible debt service, the larger the amount of the district's debt service, combined with it having a small tax base per student, that's going to result in the greatest likelihood that the district is going to receive aid. I have to go through a couple of technical slides here, and then we'll get into some of the findings. So based on the formula that's set in statute, the revenue to pay the debt service can be thought of and divided into three different parts. So part one, first square on this slide, the one that's to the left, that's exclusively revenue from the school district's property taxes. It's unequalized. That means there's no state aid that's going to be part of this part one set of the revenue. Only parts 2 and 3, the second and third squares here on this particular slide, have the opportunity for generating some state aid. The amount of the equalization in the third, the final square, it's quite a bit larger than it is in the second square. But even certain districts that will have sufficient debt that would, eligible debt service that would make them fall into parts 2 and 3, even some of those could receive little, if any, state aid. But let me focus your attention on part 1, because that's what I want to spend a little bit of time here on. So the amount of revenue in part 1, as I said, it's totally unequalized, no state aid available. But it's determined by multiplying the school district's tax base by a threshold percentage that's, again, specified in statute. And this is, for part 1, 15.74% of a district's tax base. So I had mentioned at the outset the definition of a threshold is that it's a cutoff point, and that's true for this particular threshold. So what this is a cutoff between how much a district has to pay solely from its local property tax, represented by part 1 on this slide, and how much is going to come instead from the revenue depicted in parts 2 and part 3 on this slide. And I'm going to go through a hypothetical example just to make this, perhaps make this a little bit more understandable. So with my hypothetical school district, let's think about a district that has a tax base of $10 million. So thinking about that part 1, we're going to multiply that $10 million tax base by this threshold percentage of 15.74%, and that comes out to $1,574,000. So this means that the district will have to pay out of its local tax, property tax collections, revenue that's up to $1,574,000 of its debt service. Now let's assume that this particular district had $1.5 million worth of debt service that it had to pay in a year. That threshold amount of the local tax revenue, that $1,574,000, would be enough to pay off that $1.5 million debt for that particular year. And in that case, this particular district would not receive any state aid. It doesn't go into parts 2 and 3 because all of what it generates from that part 1 calculation would pay off the debt service for that district for that year. I do want to mention that most of the 231 school districts in fiscal year 2019 they were in the same boat essentially as this hypothetical district. That is, they had debt service, it was eligible for the program, and I'm talking about 2/3 of the districts here, but they were paid for exclusively with the local property tax dollars as defined by that part 1 of the 3 parts of the revenue. I will point out that if this hypothetical district had a higher level of debt service, let's say $5 million of capital debt, it would still pay that threshold amount of the $1,574,000 that we talked about with that local levy, but it would also have a portion of its revenue coming from that first tier revenue that we called part 2 and likely that second tier revenue, both of which can include state aid. So I do want to point out that in the full report, we do describe in detail the calculation of the formula. And we also have a hypothetical district represented here, and we go through step by step how we would, as a state, calculate the aid and levy for that particular district. That's on page 18 if you're looking through the full report. Now I do want to turn back to our major finding, that the debt service equalization program has had limited impact over time. So first, the percentage of school districts that have eligible debt service that went on to receive aid has declined. So if you look back at fiscal year 1997, which was the earliest year for which data was available and is one of the earliest years of the program itself, 51% of the school districts at that point did have eligible debt service and they did receive aid. And that amounted to about 131 districts at that time. But by 2019, we're down to 34 districts. Only 15% of these districts that had eligible debt service, but then did get aid, amounted to about 34 districts in the most recent year. And this is a 71% decrease over this 23-year period. The amount of aid itself has also decreased over time. So we adjusted the dollars of aid to account for inflation, but you can still see on this chart that in 1997, the aid amounted to $61 million, again, adjusted for inflation, but that decreased over time to to fiscal year 2018, where it was $22 million. And this represents a 64% decrease in the amount of aid generated by the program. Now, I do want to point out that over these same years, as you can see that downward, kind of steady downward trend, the amount of eligible debt service for school districts around the state actually increased. So there was actually more eligible debt service by about 18% over the same period of time, even though the aid amount generally trended down. You can see, if you look at about 2012 or so, and then beyond the years following 2012, we're seeing kind of an opposite direction. It's trending up a bit here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why that might be. I mean, it could be due to a number of different reasons, but we think that some of that is explained by legislative changes that were made around that time. So I did say at the outset when I was trying to define terms that the equalizing factors are percentages that determine what a district's amount of aid will be. And as I said, if the equalizing factor is high, it's going to generate more aid from the state. Well, between 2013 and 2016, the legislature made 3 separate changes to the equalizing factors that are in the formula. And those could have, and probably did, lend to that increasing trend that you see post-2012. We also do have an appendix in our report, the full report on page 89. It lists all the major legislative changes to the program that have occurred over the years. I want to talk about how the aid actually affected, or how much of the aid actually paid for the eligible debt service. And this slide looks at all eligible debt service in the state for all of the school districts that happen to have it in each one of these years. So back in fiscal year 1997, you see that the aid from this program paid for just 11% of the eligible debt service in the state at the time. We look now to current day, and that has decreased to 3%. And that's a 73% decline over this 23-year period. Now, again, this particular slide analyzes all eligible debt service for all school districts in the state. But remember, I said earlier that there are many districts that simply don't get any aid. So I wanted to look at those districts that do receive aid and how much the aid actually helped them out. So that's on this slide. Here we show just the districts that got aid from the program and the proportion of aid that paid off their debt service. You see, if you look at the first point, 1997 again, that the aid for the districts that are, the average aid for the districts represented 26% of the debt service in that year, and that has diminished over time to now 13% on an average basis for the districts that are getting aid. So all in all, these trends that I just discussed indicate our conclusion that the effect of the program has diminished over time. I'm going to move on now, Mr. Chair and members, to another part of our evaluation. We compared the debt service equalization program to other state programs to help, they're set up to help school districts with their school district facility needs. So we looked at 8 other programs that are in place. We saw that they are structured differently, they serve different purposes. For example, for some of the programs, the school districts have to use the program dollars in only certain ways. So for instance, for some programs, the money can be used only for deferred maintenance or for making the buildings accessible or compliance with building codes. The revenue can't be used for some of these programs for things like instructing new classrooms. Some programs offer state aid, others do not. Some of the programs require going to the voters and getting that approval through a referendum, when others do not. And some of these programs require the review and comment for the projects, others do not. So I won't go into any more detail on all 8 of these programs, but we do have a chart in the full report on page 40 that lists each of them and compares their major components. I do want to talk briefly about 2 of these 8 where we looked at them in some more depth to better understand how they compare with the debt service equalization program. One of these is called the Operating Capital Revenue Program. So some school districts do use this program to make building repairs, again, bring buildings into compliance with code requirements or to purchase some equipment. There are some similarities between the Operating Capital Revenue Program and the Debt Service Equalization Program. First, and maybe most important in the eyes of the school districts, is that it offers state aid. Second, they both generate funding that the law says can be used to help construct or conduct major renovation of school district facilities. But there are also some big differences between operating capital revenue and the debt service equalization program. First, the projects are not required, the projects for operating capital revenue are not required to undergo that review and comment that the Department of Education is responsible for. Second, the districts do not have to go to their voters to get approval for the projects that are going to be funded with the operating capital revenue. And third, because the operating capital revenue is actually a part of the state's general education revenue program, nearly all school districts are going to receive revenue through it, but the amount of revenue available is going to be limited to what that funding formula provides. We learned from school district officials with whom we spoke during the course of this evaluation that they tended to use the operating capital revenue for things like, smaller needs, purchasing curriculum or purchasing textbooks, doing some technology work. They said that the revenue for them is insufficient for building needs. And then the final difference that I want to point out is that the operating capital revenue program has more equalization attached to it than the debt service equalization program. And that's available, or you can see that more clearly on this next slide. That first column represents the operating capital revenue program,
if I'd call your attention to the little teal rectangle inside that first column, that represents the amount of aid that was generated through the operating capital revenue for fiscal year 17. And that amount is about 5 times larger than the amount of aid that was generated that same year through the debt service equalization program.
So what should we do about that Senate bill?
I'm going to move on to talk about the second program we looked at in some more depth. That's the program called Capital Project Referendum. And again, we don't think that it is a substitute for debt service equalization. The program shares some similarities with the debt service equalization program. They both require voter approval. They have to go to their voters via a referendum and get approval for projects funded through either capital project referendum or debt service equalization. Both are allowed to use the funds that come about for constructing new school facilities. And both programs require the school districts to have their projects undergo a review and comment. Now, there's one exception, and that is with the capital project referendum. If a project is technology only, the school district does not have to bring that to the Department of Education for review and comment, but in all other cases, they do. The difference is here, the capital project referendum program has no state aid available at all. So even though we were kind of talking about how little state aid debt service equalization offers, at least has some, but with the capital project referendum program, there is none. There's no opportunity for a district to get state aid. And then the second big difference is, comes in the term for repaying the bonds. And by law, the capital project referendum program has to be, any bonds issued have to be repaid within a 10-year limit. That compares to the 20-year debt repayment schedule that's typical for most of the bonds that are issued through the debt service equalization program. And the reason that's significant is when you think about it, if you have the same project that has the same cost and the same interest that's being charged for the borrowed money, and you have to repay it in 10 years, obviously it's going to be a larger payment than if you could spread those payments out over a 20-year period. And for some school districts, that extra expense on an annual basis is just too much. So we have drawn, based on our findings of how the program itself has diminished over time, as well as our conclusion that the program is, or that other facility programs really cannot serve as a substitute for debt service equalization, we have recommended that the legislature consider changing the program to help pay for school facilities in more of the school districts that have low property wealth and high debt service. In our report, we do lay out different options that the legislature could consider to implement this recommendation. One option involves changing some components of the formula. And we talked a moment ago about this 15.74% threshold. That's used to set the base amount that a school district is going to have to pay from its local levies to fund that part one of all the revenue, the 3 parts of revenue. Lowering that 15.74% to some amount less, any amount less would help, but of course, the more that would be lowered, the more that additional school districts might become eligible for the state aid. Another example, besides lowering the thresholds, is to change the equalization factors. As I said, the equalization factors are the pieces of the formula, the percentages of the formula that are going to determine how much a school district is going to get in aid. And the higher that equalization factor, the more aid will be available. A second set of options for the legislature to consider would be redefining which districts are eligible for the program. Again, there are a couple of examples here. One would be to think about the school districts that have the oldest buildings. Right now, the formula for debt service equalization has nothing to say about, never considers anything about the age of the buildings. But that's certainly going to be a criterion when it comes to thinking about where is this aid needed the most. So one possibility is to perhaps redefine eligibility by saying those districts that have the oldest buildings in the state meet a certain criterion that right now does not exist in the law. Another would be to allow school districts to qualify even if they have a somewhat smaller amount of eligible debt service. So for instance, the state could disregard the amount of debt for some school districts that perhaps have the lowest tax base per student, but perhaps all the way up to some increment of the state average. So that would allow some school districts that don't have tremendous amounts of debt, but do have some, and if they're having difficulty funding it, to have some of the aid that this program now provides. And then the third area that we suggest as a possible mechanism for increasing aid is to respond to what is now unpredictability in the amounts of aid from one year to the next. Now, some superintendents have told us that because they don't get the same amount of aid from one year to the next, that has a way of creating a tax impact for those districts that might get less aid or no aid in the second year after having received some aid the prior year. Addressing this would mean increasing the stability of the state aid that a district receives over the length of its bonds repayment schedule. Now, the legislature did take a step in the direction of accomplishing this when it made a change that affected the equalizing factors for fiscal year 2018. But additional changes could further stabilize the amount of a district's aid, again, from one year to the next. The final component of our research looked at the review and comment process that the Minnesota Department of Education oversees. As I mentioned earlier, the school districts have to obtain the review or have to submit information to the department so that the department can do a review and comment on their facility proposals. And that applies to referenda on bonding projects of at least $2 million per school site. State law requires the department to review each of these proposals and to assess the educational and the economic advisability of the proposal. So that assessment of advisability for both educational and economic advisability is based on information that is required by law for the school district to submit to the Department of Education. The department is by law required to come to a conclusion and submit its comment on the proposal within 60 days of having received the proposal from a district. So this comment from the department is really important. The department can issue one of three possible ratings after it has gone through its review. So it can come out with a positive rating, an unfavorable rating, or a negative rating. And only those projects that receive that positive rating will be eligible for aid through the debt service equalization program. Again, thinking about the set of projects that we had looked at when we did a review of certain cases during this evaluation, all but one of them received a positive rating. There was only one that received an unfavorable rating. The department staff told us that they couldn't remember any time in the past when they had assigned a negative rating to proposals that had come in from the districts. We also looked at the timeliness because of that statutory requirement that the department respond within 60 days of receiving the proposal. The timeliness is important for the school districts because they plan on receiving that letter within 60 days, and they base their schedules for their referendum and other activities on receiving that letter with the rating from the department within that 60-day threshold. So what we found is that for 91% of the 98 projects that we looked at, the department did complete that review and comment within the 60-day limit. For the remaining 9 cases, though, it was unclear whether the department actually had met the 60-day limit because they involved some unusual circumstances that the statute right now doesn't address. And I'll quickly describe those. For 6 of the cases, the department had said the project proposals they received were incomplete, they lacked certain statutorily required information, and they weren't able to put together a conclusion and send out a comment letter in time. Well, we looked at these cases in a little bit more depth, and we concluded that some of that delay is attributable to certain districts lacking a timely response, but other of those cases were attributable to the department dragging its feet a bit. And then there were a couple where it was a combination of both the district and the department having some delays involved. Then the last 3 of these 9 cases where we had some question about whether the 60-day limit was met involved revised comment letters. And for these, the department sent an original letter to each of these 3 districts, and they did it within the 60-day threshold, no problem. However, they went on to have to submit revised letters that contained corrections. And in those corrected letters, all 3 of those occurred outside of the 60-day limit. So based on our findings related to the review and comment process, we have 2 recommendations, one for the legislature, one for the Department of Education. So first, we recommend that the legislature clarify in law the start and end points for this 60-day limit on the review and comment process. I mean, as one example, it could specify that the timer or the clock that's counting the 60 days would come to a stop for the interval of time between when the department might request additional information from a district and when the district supplies that information. The second recommendation is that the Department of Education provide additional information on the content that's required from school districts in the proposals that they submit. The department already does have some written guidance on what districts should provide to the department so that the department can conduct its review and comment. But we think something more specific, perhaps a template that districts could use, would be helpful, especially for those school districts that haven't a lot of experience with the ins and outs of the review and comment process. We think that this template could result in some more complete facility proposals that come to the department and perhaps reduce the need for the department to go back out and request additional information so that they can complete the review. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I'll conclude my remarks. I'd be glad to answer questions about our evaluation report.
I would like to have Mr. Melcher come up. I know Representative Bernardi has a question, but we will have to be getting to our respective caucuses within about 5 minutes. So, Representative Bernardi.
I have a question regarding, this is interesting how we had you review debt service equalization. I know you guys knew I wanted a broader one with referendum equalization. But my question to you is, do you have any recommendation on looking at the state of Minnesota, looking at all the debt service and possibly the levy referendums and the tax burden, or whatever you want to call it, the school districts are carrying in figuring it out how to provide equalization aids to the school? Because I know my school districts have a number of different debt tools that they use, some equalize, some not equalize. So do you see the question I'm asking?
Ms. Howard.
Mr. Chair and Representative Bernardi, I think I understand your question. This report does not contain any recommendation related to operating referenda. We looked solely at the debt service for capital projects. And so I think that's certainly, I mean, what you're suggesting is something that could be done at a future point, and we could go through the topic selection process that the LAC has in place. But in our report, we did not look at the operating side of the picture, only the capital debt.
Representative Bernardi.
Okay, just to follow up really quickly. So I know my school district has a lot of different debt programs that they use. Some are equalized, some are not. Is there any recommendation from your office to look at the total debt that a school district is carrying, that equalize or not equalize, and maybe starting to equalize them equally? If that makes sense?
Ms. Howard.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bernardi, are you talking specifically about just debt, use of debt programs, some of which are equalized and some are not?
Yes.
Representative Bernardi, no, we did not, because what we concluded is that the different programs have specific purposes in law and are quite different from one another in structure. Yes, they're all to the end goal of trying to help school districts with their buildings, whether it's maintenance or whether it's building new buildings. But because their purposes were so different, we did not arrive at the conclusion that you're suggesting.
Mr. Melcher.
Mr. Chair and members, my name is Tom Melcher. I'm the School Finance Director at the Department of Education. The department would like to thank the Office of the Legislative Auditor for their thorough and objective review of the debt service equalization program and for their thoughtful findings and recommendations. The department generally agrees with the recommendations of the report. We think the report does an excellent job of documenting the decline in the debt service equalization program since 1997, with the portion of the debt service costs funded by the state going from 11% to 3%, and the decline from 51% of school districts with eligible debt receiving some assistance from the state to now at 15%. We think that creates some problems for school districts, specifically greater inequities in the tax rates for low tax-based school districts that have a lot of debt to provide adequate facilities for their students. And we also believe that can create some issues for school districts that are trying to pass an operating referendum if they have very high debt service tax rates. So for that reason, we agree with the
OLA's recommendation that the legislature should consider changing the debt service formula to pay for a higher portion of school facility costs in a larger portion of the districts. In particular, the department thinks it would be appropriate for the legislature to consider lowering the threshold and also increasing the equalization level for the first tier of the equalization program, perhaps gradually to the point where we are approaching the original state share, where roughly half of the school districts with eligible debt would qualify for some assistance. With regard to the recommendations on the review and comment process, we agree that it would be beneficial both for the department and for school districts to have greater clarification in terms of the 60-day limit, and also that it would be helpful to have some additional information provided for the school districts to try to minimize the number of cases where the department needs additional information. And to that end, the department plans to do a review of the cases where we have had some delays, and to try to figure out if there are any commonalities to those and what type of solution would be best to deal with that. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you. Ms. Randall, any final notes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just note that we have another Audit Commission meeting scheduled for Wednesday to release our evaluation on MnDOT's measures of financial effectiveness. That will be the last evaluation we are releasing this session, and then we will be kicking off the topic selection process for the next round.
And if at that meeting, we could also have a little update from the commission about accessibility and what's being done with Mr. Heller's concerns, if we could talk about that on Wednesday. With that, the meeting is adjourned.